Hello and welcome to Build. Our next guest truly needs no introduction. She has sold more than 50 million records and won 9 Grammys in her 3-decade career. And today she is here in support of her 11th studio album, Threads, which sees her sing with superstars as wide-ranging as Willie Nelson, Stevie Nicks, and St. Vincent. You guys, Sheryl Crow is here today. Let's start, actually, that was the video, obviously, for Redemption Day. I do want to start with how that came together. The long list of collaborators on this album are all other living collaborators.
Yeah.
You know, now we have Johnny Cash. Tell me about this song and also this video.
Well, this is kind of a strange situation in that I wrote a song after going and playing for the troops in Bosnia with USO. And I came home, and what was on TV was so different than what I'd seen. What was on TV was Rwanda, which was total genocide, and yet we weren't there. It was just happening in front of us. And so I wrote a song about why we go into the places we go into and why we make the decisions that we make. And the song felt really important to me at the time. It was 1996 or 97. Cut to, I think it came out on the second record, the Sheryl Crow record. And then cut to 2002, I think it was. A few months before Johnny passed away, his son-in-law gave him this song, and Johnny called me and asked me all kinds of questions about it and said, I feel like this song needs to be heard right now. It's very important. We were dabbling in the Middle East, and Johnny always stood up for the things he believed in, whether they were popular or unpopular. And so he recorded it, and then he passed away. And so now with what's going on in America, the song just kept like presenting itself in my mind. And so I took Johnny's vocal to a click track and just played this piano part under it. I sent it to his family, and they were all on board about putting it out. And then I added my vocal to it, even though I didn't want to add my vocal. I loved it without my vocal.
You can't just release a Johnny
I
Cash song,
couldn't. My producer kept saying, this is not a Johnny Cash record, okay? So, but yeah, so it's definitely, there are a lot of moments like this on the record that feel so mystical and, you know, kind of otherworldly.
I do want to talk about that long list of collaborators. I mean, I'm just looking right here. Maren Morris, Stevie Nicks, Bonnie Raitt, Mavis Staples, Keith Richards, Jason Isbell, Joe Walsh, Chris Stapleton. It goes on and on and on. I think there's 20 or 21 in total. Did you know before you even started this album you wanted this to be sort of a group project, or did this kind of just arrive naturally?
It totally arrived naturally. The whole project started out with a recording session with Chris Christopherson, and I think I'm not talking out of school when I say that it's widely known that he's been diagnosed with either Alzheimer's or tick-borne dementia illness. And so to work with someone like that you've known for 25 years, somebody as brilliant as him, and it's such a profound inspiration for me as a songwriter, and to see how music keeps the brain still connected to your essence and to who you are. I came away from that session just feeling like, man, I want more of that. I want more of that connection with the people that have inspired me to do what I'm doing and who still inspire me and who have become friends. And so that's how it started. I didn't know it was going to be a whole album until the Johnny Cash track. And then I felt like maybe this is a whole album.
I would think that the biggest challenge here is both finding time in your own and these people's schedules to even get in the studio, long distance or in person.
Yeah.
How did you sort of handle that? This obviously song came from 2002, but when are we talking about? When did you start these recording?
Well, I started the process about 3.5 years ago, and didn't have a record label, had no time constraints, paid for it myself. So it wasn't like, oh, we got to hurry up and get this done. We just worked on it as it presented itself, and as we had the songs. In the meantime, in the middle of making all of these different tracks, I also made a record called Be Myself. So, and that was like 3 weeks. So we were multitasking.
Okay. I don't think that there's one general theme to this album. I think if you listen to it, you hear a remarkable amount of styles, but also lyrical content to talk about. There's one song that, I mean, first listen jumped out at me, and that's Story of Everything.
Oh, wow. Cool.
It just so much speaks to like the anxiety of our times and, you know, gun violence and political divisiveness. And not that you haven't been outspoken for your entire career, but I am curious, why did you say, I've got to put this message out? I have to talk about this.
Oh gosh, it's hard for me to talk about this record and not be really emotional. I have 2 young boys, and it's really hard having grown up when I did. I mean, I remember the early 70s, the late 60s. I was 8 years old, and I remember the social unrest that was going on in America. And I've lived through a lot of transitions in America, but I've never seen the American public be so at odds with itself and so unable to meet in the middle. And I've never seen our dinner tables be divided by a president like we are now. And it hurts. It hurts my heart because I'm raising 2 little boys and I'm talking to them about what the truth means and how important it is and how we treat each other with empathy and compassion and acceptance. And we carry on a dialogue even when we don't agree on everything, and yet everything that's going on around them amplifies something different. So I can't help but bring that into the studio when I'm writing, and I hope people will, you know, if you don't like it, turn it off, go to the next song. If you do, hopefully it will resonate something in you that feels hopeful at least. But it's just a part of my process, and I'm at an age now where, you know, I don't feel like I have to care about offending people with my own concerns about raising kids and leaving them this earth.
It's curious, you know, with a song like that, I wonder how far along were you before you sent it around to collaborators and said, hey, Chuck D, will you be on this?
The whole thing started actually with a conversation with my brother, because he has a job site all the time. He's always building houses. And he said, you know, 15 years ago, people would come and ask if he had any work for them. And he said, people don't even come ask anymore because they don't want the work. You can't make enough money working and making minimum wage. So it's almost... it behooves you to be on welfare and get the phone cards and the food cards and all that sort of stuff and cash it in. You can even be on Medicaid and make $36 an hour on all the government assistance. So it's a catch-22. It's something that we've let happen in this country, and it's unfair. But I wrote the song at the piano with Steve Jordan, and man, when we recorded it, and boom, I was like, we got to get Chuck, you know, who I've known for a long time. We got to get Gary Clark. This guy is a truth teller. We got to get Andra Day. If there's an argument for past lives, she's been here a lot.
100%.
Yes,
I agree.
exactly. So it was obvious to me.
Yeah. There's another conversation, obviously, that has dominated the headlines for the past few years, which is the Me2 movement. In a recent interview, you said, of course I've had these experiences as a young artist and a young woman coming up in this industry. Do you feel like now that this is kind of coming to the forefront, does a young woman or a young man entering the industry today are they safer? Do they have a better chance of not dealing with this?
I love that now you are believed in telling the story. I love that Vince Gill just put out a song and he talked about his own
Amazing
experience.
Song, yes.
A beautiful, amazing song and heartbreaking circumstances. It's not just happening to young women, it's happening to young men too. And I love that now we're not on the bad side of history by pointing these things out. I wrote a song actually on my first record, and you know, I had to deal with a potential lawsuit and everything. It's been going on forever, and I think there's just got to be a point in our humanity where we have to define what power means, and it looks a lot different now, and that's all good, and it will be great when it becomes normal, because there has been some subterfuge as well with people who've gone down in bad circumstances with no defense. So, you know, it's going to be a good day when everybody looks at each other as equal.
I'm curious I'm sure you get approached for advice for young artists constantly, but especially in this regard, you know, standing up for yourself or figuring out how to set up your boundaries, what would your advice be to a young artist?
Well, you know, I feel like I came up at a time when I didn't hold the cards to my career, and things are so different now. There are 1,000 ways to get your music heard. There are 1,000 ways to be the captain of your ship, and also you do have the platform now to voice discomfort, to voice incongruence, to point out the unfairness or the inequality. And I think you have a better opportunity now to be the captain of your ship than before. And I think everybody's a little bit on guard. You know, I don't think, like in the old days, I don't think a man in an office at the head of a record label can tell somebody they need to be sexier without suffering the repercussions of that. So, I mean, it's definitely put everybody on notice.
I love hearing how much Nashville is on this record. You actually have music coming out on the High Women's record tomorrow, which is a new Nashville supergroup of Maren Moore.
If you do not buy
Brandon
that
Carlin.
record,
It's very
right
good.
after you buy my record, I will hunt you down.
We hear you immediately on that record. I just like love seeing Chris Stapleton, Jason Isbell. I mean, all these names. And you were speaking, I think it was in a profile recently, saying, you know, when I moved to Nashville, it was right after pretty much the worst time of my life.
Yeah.
And I found this community in this home. Is that part of paying it back to the community and just saying, I want to feature you guys in my work? You've been so much a part of my life.
It's, I don't know about paying it back. I mean, it's actually deeper than that for me. I mean, for me, having little kids, they want to listen to Post Malone and Lil Nas X, and you know that's what they want to hear. They think I'm okay. They don't think I'm that cool. So
they will learn later.
They will learn. Anyway, so I listen to the radio and I go, oh, it's all tracks, you know, and 18 writers and top line and for a minute there, I was like, what's happening to the album and art and you know. And then I looked around me and I went, oh my gosh, there's so much great music out there that you don't hear at commercial radio that's happening all around us. And I'm getting invited to that party of being on the Outlaw Tour and being with Chris Stapleton and Jason Isbell and getting to hang out and play with Gary Clark Jr. and Brandi Carlile, who I've known since she was knee-high to a boll weevil, and bringing in Maren Morris. And I mean, and to not pay it forward, I mean, it's wonderful. I get to look backwards and thank James Taylor for writing, you know, Sweet Baby James and inspiring me to leave my hometown. But to be able to look forward and say, everything is beautiful. I mean, there's still people writing songs and going out and playing and connecting with their audiences. It makes me hopeful.
I love it. There have been many headlines about this being your final album. I don't know if you came to that conclusion or you had that thought. Was it, I'm going into this thinking, okay, this has got to be sort of the end of the way of releasing music like this? Or was it just at the end of the day, you looked at it and you said, I can't outdo this. Like, this is sort of my end stone.
It was that. It was after the Johnny Cash track. And I literally tried to sing it 4 or 5 times. And then I finally found my way in. And when it was done, a couple of weeks went by and I called Steve and I said, this is my last album. And for a couple of reasons. I couldn't figure out what do you follow this up with, you know? And secondly, we get music so differently now. We don't lay under the piano with an album and read the notes and dream about leaving our 3-stoplight town. And we get it differently now. We cherry pick things and we put them on playlists, or they come out on a hits playlist or whatever. And that's how you find your music. There are tried and true people that are buying vinyl still, and that's great. But I feel like for me, at this point in my life, I love the immediacy of being able to put a song out like Wouldn't Want to Be Like You with St. Vincent last year that really talked about the truth and what an inconvenience it's become for a lot of our leaders. And to be able to just go, yeah, here it is. And to go out on something that for me is really the summation of my musical life and my personal life too is great. I feel great about it.
It's probably worth clarifying that you're in no way, shape, or form retiring. It's just the album.
I am not equipped to do anything else. I don't know. I can't even cook a good meal. So my kids know I'm a one-trick pony. I'll go out and jump on the trampoline, and I'll play basketball. But if it's something, a job, I don't know how to do anything else. So this is it.
I've got to wonder, you know, I was thinking, in the decades of your career, you've seen both the very peak of the album when people were selling tens of millions of records, and now obviously a much different world where, like you're saying, does it resonate? Do people care about it? I'm curious what art form or release form does captivate you. Is it the full-length music videos that are 40 minutes long, singles?
I love albums. I love vinyl. I used to have a vinyl collection, and somewhere along the way it kind of got left in different garages as I moved. And then I bought all the CDs. I had hundreds of, 1,000 CDs probably. And I would take a suitcase on the road full of CDs with broken cases and everything. And then I started buying vinyl again, and I recreated my whole album collection, and I love that. And my kids are growing up with vinyl, and they love that. I love anything long form. I love anything that takes you away. There was a whole study about the 6-second attention span and how you got to change your hook and da-da-da-da-da. And I think it's great for us to eat salmon every now and again, to get away from the burger and fries. And I think people really are getting back to that. And I don't know if we'll ever get back to the album full-length form, but I tell every artist, make albums, because the tracks that you write that aren't the singles that mean the most to you, you will be forever grateful that you wrote them and put them out, and they need to be out. Because every song I've written that meant anything to me was not something that got played at radio. And, you know, that's what you'll be remembered for. So
I'm curious, you've mentioned your sons a lot today. They are sort of the case study that a lot of record labels are looking at of how to captivate this audience and this age. Are you surprised in any way when they are drawn to a vinyl record, they want to sit and listen to something? Like, who has sort of broken through from them, from a different generation?
well, they think it's really weird when I play old music. They're like, what? Mom, what is that? But if they pick it out and they put the needle on it, they like it.
And suddenly they like it.
Yes, and I remember that feeling of trying to get the needle right in the right place and then sitting there and watching it go around, and I don't think they realize that what they're hearing is coming off of that. You know, it's just sort of more head-scratching. And they like it. They love some of the old stuff, which is surprising. Like, they love my Aretha Franklin records. They love Curtis Mayfield, so I feel like I've done my job, you know?
Mission accomplished.
Yes, exactly.
In this moment of transition, I think it is kind of fun to look back at anniversaries. You have a 25th anniversary for All I Want to Do this year.
Yeah, I wrote it when I was 8 years old.
I was going to say, I thought 6, but 8 works. I'm curious, do you remember anything from that writing session, being together with that group and sort of feeling
Yeah,
like,
I remember it vividly. I mean, we were pretty debauched. I mean, we drank a lot. We hung out at the Olive in LA until wee hours in the morning. We were conspiracy theorists. I mean, we were all so much smarter than everybody else. And we were so misunderstood. All of us so totally insanely talented and overlooked. And that's where we found our camaraderie. And we were recording actually out in Pasadena, and there was a great little bookstore around the corner. And we'd have margaritas, and we were out kind of prowling around. And we went to this bookstore, and Bill bought this really small kind of pamphlet book of poetry. And the first poem in it was called Fun. And we went home, and all of us, this was one of the very first jam sessions, and we jammed up this track that kind of felt like Steeler's Wheel or anyway. And I started singing the poem over it, thinking, well, I'll write lyrics for it later. And then I wrote lyric after lyric and tried to replace it. And finally, I just called the poet, Wynn Cooper, who was a professor at Vermont Literature College, I think, Literary College, and said, hey, dude, we're going to give you 50% of the publishing because we just used your poem. And he's like, what? And then after the checks started rolling in, he was like, hey, I want to be a songwriter.
He was staring at his phone for the next
Exactly. He was watching his mailbox.
I wonder, that very quickly became your biggest hit, certainly at that point. Do you know when a song gets finished, this is going to work, like people are going to love this, or is it always kind of a crapshoot with the...
Well, that actually is an interesting story because that was the one we were sequencing the record, and we just were like, I kept saying, that's a throwaway, man. We can't put that on the record. I mean, we didn't even write the lyrics for that song.
My God.
And my brother, who was a sophomore in high school, said, that's the hit. You got to put that on the record. Me and my friends love that song. So we put out single, and then we put out All I Want to Do, and it went up the charts. And I called my brother, and I was like, you are now my new A&R guy.
The high schoolers always know.
The high schoolers know.
They do
That's
not
right.
get enough credit.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's all the time for me, but we do have some audience questions. I think we have 5. We can start right here.
Cool.
Hi.
Hi.
I loved your song, Love is Free, amongst many others. What message do you want your fans to take away from Threads?
Oh my gosh, I love that. Well, talking about Love is Free, I wrote that right after Katrina and having been in New Orleans. And it resonates now because I'm watching everything that's going on with Dorian and stuff, and just watching people come out, the best of us showing up for each other. It's a nice break from all the horrible things, even though it's a horrible circumstance, to see people at their best. But I want people, when they listen to Threads, to feel there is hope throughout. I mean, we have to sort of propel ourselves. with the idea of hope and with the emotion of hope, because right now everything looks doom and gloom, and if you watch the news a lot, it definitely makes you feel kind of hopeless. And these songs may be about what's happening, but I think they're hope-filled, and everybody on the record are people who have made me feel like life is wonderful and full of wonder. Welcome.
Oh, right here.
Hi.
You have such a diversity of artists on this album. What was it? St. Vincent really pops out to me. How were you first introduced to her music, and what was it like working with her?
So everybody on the record I have relationships with, and Annie I met at the Neil and Peggy Young event called Bridge School up in San Francisco, and it was the last Bridge School event, and we played together. I got to know her. It wasn't until after I got to know her that I checked out her music and thought, this woman is a fully realized artist. I mean, she's totally fierce and a total like truth teller. And so a couple of years later, we stayed in contact, and a couple of years later, I wrote this song about what was happening politically, and I thought of her before I was even making the record. We recorded that. In fact, we recorded it for an EP. And I sent it to her, and I said, hey, I have this song. Check it out. Let me know if you want to be a part of it. And her response, she texted back, and her response was, fuck yeah, which I did not expect less. So, and she just like totally poured her heart into it. So it was really cool. It was nice to have that generation speaking to the power of truth.
Hi, Sheryl.
Hi.
My mom and I are huge fans of
Oh my
yours.
gosh, I love that.
Clearly.
Oh, wow. A cassette. I love
I had to
you.
dig that out.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
So my question for you is, you've been through so much in the public eye, and you've handled it with such grace. I wanted to know how you dig down deep to get through all those times.
Well, it's funny you're sitting with your mom. I have a very close-knit family, and most of the hardest trials I've been through, I've had my family. I was already 29 before I ever made it, so I was pretty much who I was before I became a celebrity. And so my life has always been my life. I've kept my life intact. And the other thing, I was raised to believe in God, and I also meditate, and that's been a real lifesaver for me. I'm constantly seeking serenity and peace and understanding and wisdom. And I try, it's why they call it a practice. They don't call it a perfect, they call it a practice. I'm always trying to keep who I am intact, who I was born to be. And sometimes it's more challenging than others, but I think that joy is something we have to take notice of and try to like really pull that into our lives conscientiously. So that's where I live.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi.
Hi.
What moments of your career do you treasure most? And what are the biggest life lessons you have learned that you would like to pass to your children?
Wow. Well, I've been so fortunate. I've gotten to do some crazy stuff. Like I got to sing Mozart with Pavarotti. I got to go boating with James Taylor a couple of weeks ago. And even though I know the guy and I've recorded with him and I've played on stage with him, I still every once in a while I'm like, I'm on a boat with James Taylor. But I think the moment that meant the most to me was taking a year off to get through having been diagnosed with cancer and not allowing myself to pick up a guitar or to go to the piano or to roll a tape or to go to a notepad and write a clever song. And I didn't let my work be a go-to to help me feel like I mattered. And I had to learn that I matter because I matter, because I'm alive. And that's the lesson that's hard for all of us, is that nobody can make us feel like we matter, that we matter. Because we're here. There's a reason we're here, and we have to tap into the importance of just being awake. And I think really, truth be told, that is the lesson that I want my kids to get from me. And I try to model that to my kids. You know, all the idea about being perfect and getting straight A's and all that stuff, they already put so much pressure on themselves. And I keep saying perfect is super boring, but being curious is so cool. And they're just little lessons along the way that I hope they will see that I've learned that they can sort of sink their teeth into.
And then we have one more question.
Hi.
We have a question from an online viewer who
Awesome.
says, I'm a huge fan. I know one of your albums was banned from Walmart in the 90s for a lyric about selling guns there. What do you think about their new announcement this week that they'll begin taking action on gun control in light of horrific incidents?
Well, yes. Yay, Walmart. Yeah. Well, first and foremost, I would say, could you start selling my records again? No, I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding about that. I think it's awesome, and I hope that other, not only discount centers but stores across the nation will take some steps forward in taking some responsibility if our government's not going to do it, and at least where semi-automatic weaponry is concerned, and cop killer bullets and that kind of thing. I mean, that's all I'll say about that. But yes, I did write a song years ago, and that's one of the things I always tell young artists. The importance of making albums is that you will have tracks that you write that will mean something to people that wouldn't have been played on the radio, but that someday you'll look back on and think, I'm glad I wrote that. And that's one of those songs I feel like, okay, it mattered then, it matters now. Music has the power to kind of galvanize a movement, or to at least be the backdrop to a movement. So kudos to Walmart.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for being here, you guys. Threads is out now, and there are tour dates on Sheryl's website.
Thanks, you guys.